A warm welcome to the panel discussion. After immersing ourselves over the past 2 days in the ITAP with the conferences and the exhibition, I think it's time to embark on this Industry 4.0 journey. As the saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So we've assembled a panel of experts here to help you, to help all of us to begin to take the first step. The focus of the discussion here today, we will focus on 2 areas. The first area is how to begin this Industry 4.0 journey. What are the pitfalls to look out for? What are the challenges and difficulties? And the other area we'll focus on is standards. What sort of standards should we know about? And how to make use of standards to ensure that the journey is smoother and better. So before we begin the discussion, we'll just go around and have a quick introduction of ourselves. I'll begin with myself first. I'm the moderator. My name is Ji Sin. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Singapore Standards Council. In my full-time capacity, I'm a businessman running my family business in engineering, Sui Hin Power Systems. I got involved in standards more than 10 years ago, initially as the chairman of the Standards Development Organization under Singapore Manufacturing Federation. And later on, I was the inaugural chair of the Manufacturing Standards Committee under the Singapore Standards Council. So that's a quick intro about myself. I'll pass on to Alpesh. Alpesh, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alpesh Patel. I'm a partner at Mckinsey & Company Singapore office and working mainly on Industry 4.0 transformation, helping companies in the region on their journey towards Industry 4.0 and leading our network of digital capability centers in Asia Pacific. Very grateful to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Pui Siu.
Hi, I'm Pui Siu. I'm from SIMTEC, one of the RIs in A-Star, and my role in SIMTEC is to lead the research division, in particular the manufacturing system division, which look at all creating smart and digital technologies for industry, which is very relevant to I 4.0. And I'm also the co-chair of the Smart Manufacturing Technical Committee that look at standards for I 4.0. And with that, a brief introduction about myself. Back to you, Ji Sing.
Okay, thank you. Prof. Pang.
Hi, I'm John Pang. I'm the Deputy Director of the Advanced Manufacturing Training Academy. I'm also on secondment from NTU School of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. My role in UMTA is to facilitate training, and we have signed an MOU with ESG Standards Division to facilitate Industry 4.0 standards training, and we'll be working closely with all the IHLs and industry training providers. I'm looking forward to an exciting discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Pang. And now we move on to Hon Yong. Hon Yong is the practitioner who's implemented this I 4.0 in his company.
Yeah.
Hon Yong, please.
I'm Mok from Onmatech Private Limited. We are a precision engineering firm based in Singapore and Taiwan. So actually our firm design, manufacture and provide after-sales support to the semicon back-end industry. So actually I'm happy to be invited here to share Onmatech journey, what we have done in the past, the present and in the future. So probably I will just share. These are some of our past so-called initiative coming from, we are buying from off the shelves from PSG. So it's basically some automation projects that we have identified to address some of our process pain. So it's more of trying to, so these are some of the activities that we kickstart in our journey. So I believe that this is something useful to share to the audience, that actually we kickstart our journey pretty early, since 2014. So basically we have our first automation machine, we get confident, and then we bring in more complicated projects along the way, and then we evaluate them in the early days, and then we bring them with the assistance from Enterprise Singapore grants. And then we actually also focus on our trainings to our members, how we can actually be independent, taking over the machines, and then to be able to sustain the projects. So these are some of the activities we have done until this year. So we are trying to see how we can continue to integrate projects from hardware to software. So this is an overview of what we are doing it now, today. So basically, some standards actually that is of reference to the audience will be OPC, UA, that actually we are now trying to integrate our MES systems to robotic cell and some of the software integration as well from design automation. So these are some pretty exciting developments that we have in mind, and then we are moving forward. And then probably for some audience considerations that during this journey, probably you can just share a light strategy, learn from others, identify good partners, and probably continue to train your members, and ultimately explore. Continue to explore for innovation projects and activities that can add on top of your solutions. With this, I'll pass back to Jising. Thank you.
Thank you, Hon Yong. You know, coming from many of the non-expert perspective, we see I 4.0 as a big word. Probably start not just from the company, it starts from the supplier and ends with the customer. You have cyber security, you have the cloud, you have artificial intelligence, big data, sensor, all these. So it sounds terribly complicated. So I'm sure one of the questions that a lot of the audience here would like to know is, so where do I start? Where do I start, and how do I embark on the journey? Maybe we'll let Dr. Alpesh take the lead in sharing his views.
Sure. And I would think, of course, to what you have highlighted, it's typically quite a daunting perspective to get going on the journey. And by the way, quite impressed by the journey that Onwatech has gone through. I think it shows really what is possible to do when you do it right. Yes. Where do you start is really first understand and take a step back, which is look into Lean or Six Sigma, if you want, and understand what is today the core value driver that allows your operations to deliver what is required, you know, in terms of either sales targets or what have you, right? Are you mainly solving for labor productivity? Are you solving for equipment efficiency? Are you solving for quality? I think having that understanding is critical to get going. And then just in a classic fashion, understand where today you are leaving value on the table. Mm-hmm. That is the best way. You start really from your operations, or I would say business back, rather than starting by saying, am I going to purchase a sensor here? Am I going to deploy some analytics there? That's just going to lose you. You're gonna be lost from the onset and start spending a lot of money without understanding where to apply it, right? So the starting point is, let's understand first, where would it be most impactful for me to act and potentially implement some of those Industry 4.0 use cases. And I talk about use cases before talking then about specific solutions which come from the vendors, right? So once you know that and you can quantify a little bit what is the value that you would get, right? Is it will you be able to increase your throughput by 15% because all of a sudden your equipment is able to operate, with a higher availability, what have you? Then you start understanding what do you want to do, right? What is the realm of the possible and what Industry 4.0 can bring? And even there, I think our experience looking at companies worldwide that have gone through that journey, most of them have typically started first by establishing the transparency, and i.e., if you think about Industry 4.0 as data, IoT, analytics, automation, and then new processes like 3D printing, they typically start first with the data and basically try to establish with the deployment of sensors some transparency on how they are performing today, right? It's the baselining. Yeah. And that information is put on the relevant BI dashboards, digital performance management, and that in itself already allows companies, by having all of that information available, to make some decisions and already find some improvements in terms of productivity. Some of the programs for SMEs here have focused purely on establishing that transparency, and we've seen gains that range from 10 to all the way to 275%, so a huge potential gain. So that's the starting point, after which you move, once you have acquired enough data, you start moving on to, rather than looking at the data on the dashboard, how you leverage analytics, or how you automate some of the decisions, and how do you integrate, which I think has been already introduced by Mr. Mok.
Yeah, I like the part where you were saying that you have to start with the fundamentals. Look at which are the areas where you can unlock the value, get the system and processes correct, and it's not just like buying one sensor here and buying a program there. So okay, so let's say after we have identified where are the areas where you can unlock your value and make sure that your Six Sigma and so on is well done. Maybe to praise you, how can the model factory and SimTech help the company in this journey after they've identified those values to be unlocked?
Okay, thank you, Ajit. I think Alpesh got it very right. Every company should look at digital transformation from what it brings, the value it brings to their business. And once you have those use cases, I think the next thing that always gets company stuck is, then which technology should I use? How should I use them? Okay. And there are so many out there. And that is where I think companies can do with a little bit of help, in particular the SMEs, of how do you roadmap your needs versus your investment and ROI. And that's where many programs out there. SimTech also provide some of these capabilities to help company roadmap their digital transformation journey. And we always tell companies, begin with the end goal in mind, okay? Plan for the long term, but start small. And once you get small implementation going, and employees and companies, the bosses alike, see the value, then they will get better buy-in and it's easier to go on. And this has been proven true in many companies that we have helped. We give them a long-term roadmap, but we ask them to start small and how to do it step by step. I think that's one of the critical things. And having a structured way to look at what solutions they should put to solve their use case problems helps them in identifying the needs without going straight into the technology. In fact, when we help companies, technologies only look at stage 4. For example, with this 5-stage methodology, technologies is only look at the stage 4. The first 3 is all about their business. Where are their issues? Where's their business needs? Where's their pain points? And then the solutions. And the solutions then will help them. What's out there in the market? What you really need? What's your ROI? If you put in a 200K solution, does it meet your ROI? Maybe don't start with a 200K. Start with a 50K solution, for example. So that's how we help companies, for example. And we have helped quite a lot. And I'm happy to see that there are quite a lot of companies already embarking. And they are already sold into the idea of I 4.0 or digital transformation. They just need some help to structure this.
Okay. Thanks, Pui Siu. Yeah. So I hear from Pui Siu, we got to have a roadmap first. And the roadmap will come with an end goal. And you also got to choose your solution wisely. One problem that we may face is that you don't know what you don't know. So I think I would like to hear from the trainer, from Prof. Pang here, from MTA, on how do we bridge the gap and educate ourselves to begin this journey. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. That's a very pertinent question. I think training is a very important area, especially for SMEs, to be able to catch up quickly with what the MNCs are doing in terms of Industry 4.0 adoption. And one convenient way to do that is to look at standards. I think here in Singapore, we are very fortunate that the ESG Standards Division has formed a Manufacturing Standards Committee, which some of us are sitting on the committee. And beneath the Manufacturing Standards Committee, there are many other technical committees. For example, we have a Smart Manufacturing Technical Committee, which I sit in as well. And these committees basically select and curate standards. For example, IEC standards, ISO standards, and also formulate Singapore standards. Now, standards are very important documents. You form a very high-level committee that actually consolidate all the relevant information that is required, for example, in smart manufacturing, connectivity, or in cybersecurity, for example. And this document is a wealth of information because you have experts, practitioners, and MNC companies that are advising these technical committees. And they consolidate this knowledge in a very high impact document. Now, standards are meant to facilitate the adoption of technologies. So, for example, original equipment manufacturer would be able to communicate with its contract manufacturers some of the terms and conditions they would require to put into their contract. Okay, and obviously they're going to pick and choose the terms and conditions that are favorable to both OEMs and contract manufacturers. They want to make sure that their business succeed. All right, so standards are not meant to be burdens. They are meant to facilitate you to perform to a certain standard whereby both OEMs and contract manufacturers can go on with the business. So this is very important. So AMTA is working very closely with ESG Standards Division and all our institutes of higher learning training providers, including industry training providers, to educate and to train the awareness of using standards in your business practices, particularly in manufacturing.
Thank you, Prof. Pang. Before we move on to Hon Yong, I just want to clarify that. So with AMTA, is it easy for an SME to sign up for courses in AMTA?
Very easy. Just contact AMTA. We are available in LinkedIn and in the website. We will put you in touch with the appropriate sort of training provider in the field that you are inquiring about.
Okay, very good. I see from the poll result here that the greatest concern is that there are so many standards out there. Companies are not sure what standards to use. Okay. Well, the ESG and the Standards Council, we've come up with, together with other partners, we have the I4.0 toolkit. The toolkit comprises some 70 over standards relating to I4.0, and they're all classified into their respective areas like automation and robotics, cyber security, etc. So that's a good point to start. And maybe Hon Yong can also share with us how, when you embark on the journey, you're probably faced with this question of there are so many standards out there. So how do I navigate my way? Please, maybe you can share with us.
On hindsight, actually, when we first started this journey, actually, standards is not our first primary consideration. It's more of finding suppliers that can work closely with SME, and then how we can actually, whether it's user-friendly enough for us to do it independently, and how we can sustain the solutions. So we are pretty lucky that our MES suppliers, by using the standards of OPC-UA, so basically now we are able to integrate seamlessly with other solution providers, and then we are also embarking on our own self-coding and programming to integrate with the solutions as well. So for us, I think moving forward, standards will be a benchmark or probably a reference for SMEs to actually adopt this journey, so that actually to avoid probably some shorten the learning curve, well, probably we can provide so-called good case studies to support this journey as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You were telling me just now before the panel started that you focused initially on the ISO 9001, yeah, and with those learning points, you unlock the values as Alpesh mentioned, and the standard that you focus on was really the OPC UA. Yes. Okay. Maybe you want to share with us in your journey, what are the most difficult areas that you had to deal with, and how do you overcome them?
Okay. For this journey, actually, I treat it as a knowledge management exercise. Yeah. So going back to standards, we are doing what we write, and then writing what we do. So with this technology or introduction of new tools and techniques, now we are able to see what we are doing real time. So this is pretty much so-called advantage as a user competing in a global market when ad hoc request comes in, how we can react and respond quickly to actually, therefore, this puts us in advantage over our competitors. Therefore, I believe this is something useful for the SMEs to actually to consider. That means data, once you actually secure the data, I believe you will have an edge over your competitors.
Okay. You know, some of the audience out there may think that, yeah, you've selected Onwa technology here. They are just one out of the very few companies which have been successful in I 4.0. But I think there are more than just the Onwa technologies out there who've made a successful journey in I 4.0. Maybe I can invite Pui Siu to share with us what are some of the successful implementations you've seen in SimTech and the Model Factory.
Okay. Through our engagement over the years, even before the Model Factory, we have been helping companies to go digital. Yeah. So through one of the centers called the Manufacturing Productivity Technology Center, we have helped more than 2,000 companies to go digital.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, over the years. But if you talk about I 4.0, I think one of the very good examples of SMEs will include Fong Engineering. Okay. They have a fully automated I 4.0 enabled line, for example. And there are other companies out there like Sanwa, okay? And these are just examples of SMEs. And likewise, there's also MNCs like Alcon, Makino, that has gone on to make their factory a smart factory and I 4.0 enabled. And today, although we have a model factory with a live production environment, we also get feedback sometimes from company, we don't run full capacity and we may not be in their industry vertical. So we have also set up semi-formal network, but COVID has sort of put paid to it. We are trying to revive it now that the COVID situation is better, where companies can go and visit this actual implementation of I 4.0 in our own home ground and see how, whether it's SMEs or MNCs, it doesn't really matter, okay? Like Onwa has done it, and learn the best practices, the lessons from the real implementation, and see what lessons they can get from there. Like for example, I have no MNCs that have visited Fong Engineering and learned from Fong what to do and what not to do. So these are what we call cross-learnings that we are trying to help the industry here and the ecosystem here to learn from each other. And I'm happy to say that companies are responding, they're opening up and showing what they have done and what are the lessons learned. And I'm heartened by that. And of course, companies can always come to SimTech. We can, in the Model Factory, we have many, many examples of how I 4.0 or smart factory technologies can help solve very, very common and often painful pain points that companies out there have. And I'm glad to say that with COVID getting better, the Model Factory visits are open again as of this week.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Look forward to it.
Yes.
Okay, so we've heard very welcoming response here. Pui Siu inviting you to visit the Model Factory, and Prof. Pang inviting you to learn to visit AMTA to learn more about the causes. Let's look at some of the questions coming in. We have one question for Alpesh. It says, which standards are used during Lighthouse certification audit by Mckinsey, and where can I get it? Alpesh?
Sure. I think the first clarification is that the audit is run by the World Economic Forum, and so not by Mckinsey. Probably that's important to highlight, right? And secondly, the way the World Economic Forum does it, they have a manufacturing division and have appointed a number of global CXOs, chief digital officers, chief technical officers, chief operating officers of some of the largest companies to effectively look at basically the dossier, the preparation of companies who want to become a Lighthouse. What do you need to do to get started? I think that it's fairly straightforward. a Lighthouse certification basically is about outcomes. So if you haven't started your implementation, it's not worth looking into this. If you have done an implementation, you think that that implementation has effectively brought significant financial impact in addition to operational impact, then I think it's probably good to contact either the manufacturing division at the World Economic Forum, or you can contact us as knowledge partner, and we will put you in touch with the WEF and describe the process. I would just highlight as well, I think if we talk about standards, it's I think important to outline the use of standards is mainly to ensure that the implementation of some of those Industry 4.0 use cases are done in a way that allow you to avoid some of the common technology pitfalls and allow you to scale over time. And I think that's what has been described earlier by Mr. Mok on what tech has been doing. So it's important to distinguish that from Lighthouse certification, which is more an assessment of the end outcome of all of this implementation.
Yeah, thank you, Alpesh. So as he has mentioned, we need to know about the technology pitfalls so that we can scale up the level of implementation. I think on this issue of standards, the average user may think, so how much do I need to know about standards versus what my system integrator or suppliers need to know about standards? Can I assume that they know everything about standards and I just pay and let them run the show? Prof. Pang, maybe you want to address this?
Very glad to answer this question. We also have a related question where how do SMEs find out more about standards, and how would they be able to learn more about it? And I think, as you mentioned earlier on, the ESG Standards Division through the Manufacturing Standards Committee has highlighted almost 70-odd standards. And it is important to find out what are the standards that are readily recommended by the Manufacturing Standards Committee. And in UMTA, we are working with ESG Standards Division to promote the training and education process of how these standards basically can be used in industry. And it is important also that you're recommended to sign up for these subscriptions to the standards. Because standards is the beginning of learning, your learning journey in understanding the Industry 4.0 requirements that is in front of us. And UMTA will be in a very good position to advise SMEs on which standards are appropriate for their operations. And where there's a need, we will be able to organize training provisions in these standards. For example, we have identified standards in connectivity, OPC, UA standards, and we are running courses, facilitating courses with Singapore Poly and the OPC UA Hub ASEAN. And we are also focusing on additive manufacturing standards. This is where Singapore has a leading edge. We are one of the first and fastest movers in additive manufacturing. So the standards that we have formulated through Singapore standards will be basically a signpost to the international community on how to qualify, for example, metal additive printed parts itself. And then we are also looking at robotics, robotic standards. This is also an area where Singapore has a leading edge. So please feel free to approach us in UMTA, and we will be able to advise SMEs on what standards are relevant to them. And where there's a need, we will be able to provide training provisions.
Yes, I remember those days when I was chairing the Manufacturing Standards Committee. I was the inaugural chair. And additive manufacturing standards was one of the first areas that we look into. We started with definitions.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, back.
Maybe if I can add, I think it's important to look at this as a step-by-step approach. So if an SME gets started and implements a first use case on Industry 4.0, probably they will rely on their suppliers. And it's probably just good to be aware and ask a few good questions to the suppliers to make sure that what you're purchasing as your first I4.0 solution, perhaps to establish some transparency on your shop floor, at least respect some of the key standards. And I think OPC UA is probably one of the key communication standards if you think about it. So you need to be, you don't need to be aware about all of the 70, but maybe get a little bit of familiarity, ask some questions, and then do a bit of homework based on the answers that your suppliers are giving. And that's probably good enough when you start. But then when, as you expand and start scaling up the implementation of your use case, for instance, still IoT, but no, not only on one cell, but not to your whole factory, or if you start to do some interconnectivity, that's when you need to start getting smarter. So it's not something you need to know from day one, but probably something that you get over time in a step-by-step approach.
Yes, that brings me to what I was talking to Pui Siu just now before the panel discussion. We were just chatting that in the model, or she was telling me that in a model factory, you use different brands of PLC, right? Just to try out to make sure that they are interoperable. So let's say a user start off with a certain supplier, and later on in a later stage move on to another supplier, and there's some integration issue. How can SimTech and the model factory help out in this?
I think the first thing is to know the detail. But let's say using the PLC example, I'll first invite them to SimTech and to see, for example, we have multiple brands of PLC working and how we get it going. And of course, using standard helps. The entire model factory at SimTech based mainly on two standards for communications and inter-exchange. One is OPC-UA, and that helps. Okay, certainly as you talk to different systems, different equipment, because we have different equipment that are all fully automated. So this OPC-UA helps. And the other is, of course, about sensor data, because it's a IIoT-enabled environment. There's tons of sensor data coming along, but you do not want to process it the normal way using OPC-UA because it's going to take up a lot of your bandwidth and the processing power. So we use another standard called the MQTT a lot, and that is for the publish and subscribe, very light protocols. So different standards, for example, are used for different purposes. OPC-UA is more when you need a little bit of command and control, real-time communication, and MQTT, for example, when it's light, you do publish and subscribe. So those two standards, for example, are good enough for any companies to get started in digital transformation. So that should help companies to look at. I have so many numbers to look at, and it's really a headache, and this is for a good starting point. Then the other part is, of course, cybersecurity. Oh, yeah. When your factories become connected, you are open to hacks.
Yes.
And that cannot be a forgotten arena. I think panel 2 will talk a lot about connectivity and cybersecurity, but I thought it would be good to mention it now. And we have developed a very simple 35 questions for SMEs to get started on the area of cybersecurity because it's super important. And I think I'll let the next panel go into that, for example. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess we have the SSIEC 62443 to back it up on security. Yeah.
Yes, I can't remember those numbers. Yeah, good.
I think I see a question here on developing a business case for I4.0. I think it will be most appropriate for Hon Yong to share with us. How did your 4.0 journey help in your business?
Okay, basically, I believe the tools that we have invested become a differentiator compared to our competitors. That means ultimately, the investments need to pay off. That means we are still fulfilling our business model, looking into our customer proposition, whether we can continue to deliver quality products to them, affordable pricing, and then ultimately how we can actually deliver it to them faster. So if your business model makes sense, as an SME with limited resources, look back into your own resources again. That means whether your people is ready, your assets is ready, and organization tools are ready. And then probably you can do it step by step. So like what Doctor has mentioned, set an objective, but Let's keep it simple.
Alpesh, I'm sure you've seen many cases of successful implementation and how those have helped in the business. Maybe you can just add on to what Hon Yong has mentioned in the sense that how do you make a business case out of this?
Yes, I think coming back to some of the points mentioned earlier, it starts by understanding quantifying what is the gap today. And I think it starts from first understanding what business performance are you trying to do. Are you trying to produce more within your existing facilities? Are you trying to improve the quality of and reduce the reject rate of some of your products? What are you trying to do? That's number one. Number two, then it goes into quantification of the gaps. And that will be done. Actually, you could even leverage IoT to do that. There's one program that the Singapore Business Federation drives, the Industry 4.0 Human Capital Initiative. In 6 weeks, the companies do that. They get some kits that draw data that helps them quantify basically that value at stake. What is the what was the value they could get out of IoT? Once you know what you can, the type of performance improvement that you can aspire to, then you get on to understanding what are the solutions out there, and then it's basically an understanding of what is the commercial model for that solution. How much you need to invest upfront, what is the subscription model, and how does that translate compared to the gains, either cost saving or revenue increase that you can get. And then you compute your payback period. And typically for the first use case, we would never go with something that is beyond 6 months of payback. Right? Just to be very clear, it should be something that is a quick win, because then that builds the confidence in the company that it is possible. And I think even in Singapore, and over 80 to 90 companies that have done that. So it is definitely possible to do. But it's important to be very rigorous in the process of quantification. And then I think once you have a successful use case, you can go step by step, go a little bit bigger, be a little bit more, take a little bit more risks.
So that's in line with what Pui Xiu was saying. Yeah? You start something small first, and then after that, if it's successful, you get the management buy-in, and then you move on to something that is more sophisticated and on a larger scale. Yes. It has been a very interesting discussion. I think the audience have benefited a lot. We've talked about how to embark on the journey, the pitfalls. We learned that MTA is here to help, and so is the SimTech and the Model Factory. We've learned quite a bit about the framework from Alpesh, and we've seen a real-life example from Hon Yong on Tech. It's coming to an end when we are running out of time. So we have to end it soon. I thank you. I thank everyone for your attendance. And if there's any further questions, please feel free to contact the panelists directly. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
See you.
Yeah.